Hey guys, it's Daniel. Welcome back.
With all the talk in 2022 about the blink-182 reunion with Tom DeLonge, I want to take a look at the original drummer from the band, Scott Raynor, who started out in 1992. Scott was in the band from 92 to 98. In this video, I'm going to show you a clip from my interview with Steve Kravac, the co-producer of Blink's debut album Cheshire Cat, where he talks about what Scott Raynor was like as a drummer. And later in this video, I'm going to take a look at the song blink-182 wrote about Scott Raynor. More details later. But first, the interview clip. All the interviews on my channel are original. If you want to support, the best way is to subscribe, like, and share. So I guess in comparison to Mark and Tom, how was Scott like in studio? Because he wasn't really one of the leaders of the band, right? Like, how was he as a person?
I mean, I don't recall him being in a leadership mode, you know? I just recall him like, okay, you know, Scott knows the songs. He's going to bang them out. Let's start on them, you know? I'm sure we were making a few small changes on the fly, but we were probably also trying to stick to the playbook pretty close so that we didn't get too out there and kind of get lost, you know?
And you were saying technically he was still like a decent drummer?
Yeah, I felt that he was decent. You know, I've heard other people, you know, talk about his work in a less complimentary way, but I don't feel that Scott was incompetent. I feel that he was a decent punk rock drummer, and we were able to nail the songs down with him behind the kit and move on. I thought he did a good job, you know? And I recall him being, more on the quiet side. I recall him taking input where we had it for him as far as, you know, trying to get through parts or figure stuff out. You know, he wasn't fighting anybody on anything. You know, he was a team player.
Would you happen, I mean, there's a lot of conflicting information online. Would you happen to know why he, you know, was no longer a part of Blink-182?
I honestly don't. And that's just because that after that record was done, we were both sort of on our separate busy paths. And I probably hadn't have even found out about it until I looked at one of the later records and seen that Travis was now, you know, the guy.
Were you just on a personal level surprised at all when Scott was no longer with the band?
Not, maybe a little, like in the sense that that the three guys really kind of seemed to come from the same place. You know, like they seemed like a unit to me, the three of them. Like, you know, personally. And so maybe in that respect, I thought, oh, that's kind of odd, you know, because they seem tight and they seem close and they seem to have something going. But I'm not, you know, privy to any information as far as how those decisions were made or what that's about. So that's about as much as I can honestly speak to it about. Scott was great. He applied himself and he worked hard and he wanted the best for his performances. And we really did try and get, you know, he didn't have a terrific kit. We got squeezed the best out of it that we could. I seem to recall him just after being done, sort of being relieved that he was done and just kind of kicking on the couch and letting the other guys do their thing. You know, he didn't interject too much. And you know, sort of once he was done, he was done.
So you did the drum parts first and then everything else afterwards?
Yeah, I think what we did was we recorded the songs like live off the floor. I don't think we were working with a click track. I just think that they played the songs. I might have like punched in a click track at the top of the song just to count off or something, you know, so they had a tempo to start at or a reference and then had them play it. And then we probably like patched bass here and there and then went back and kind of tried to figure out what our guitar sound was going to be. Probably patched guitar on the Fender track. And then started a new track with the Fender and the Marshall kind of blended together where we had more of a tone. And then doubled all the rhythm parts. Probably just put a few octave parts in here and there, you know, small overdub parts.
So you guys didn't do any like just singular drum recording? The drumming was part of, I guess, the live ensemble?
Yeah, it would have been part of the live performance. Just because of the time constraints that we were dealing with. Like at that era, recording to tape on a record with a budget, I would have a click track set up, printing that to tape. We'd already have a scratch guitar and a scratch vocal on tape, and the drummer would be playing by himself to scratch guitar, click, and a vocal. And then I would build the band around, or you know, it's still sort of my method, and then I'd build the band around that.
Blink-182 is one of those bands where every individual member is famous. Travis Barker in particular is a pop-punk icon. But what's often overlooked when it comes to Blink-182 is the other drummer, Scott Raynor. Scott was the original drummer in Blink from parts of 92 to 98, and he appears on the band's first two records, Cheshire Cat and Dude Ranch. Scott was fired from the band in the spring of 1998, and subsequently, Travis Barker joined the band. The first record Travis Barker appears on with blink-182 is Enema of the State. One of the songs that was written during the sessions for Enema is Man Overboard, which many believe is a song about Scott Raynor. The sessions for Enema of the State took place between January to March of 1999. This is less than a year after Scott was fired from the band. Keep in mind that Scott was a member of the band for 6 years, and for a lot of people, being in a band is like being in a relationship. A 6-year relationship is not typically something you forget quickly. And so with that in mind, if you listen to the lyrics for Man Overboard, it does seem like it's about Scott Raynor, but I want to be clear that this is speculation because the band has never publicly addressed whether the song is actually about Scott or not. For a bit of context, let's go over the details of what led to Scott being let go by the band and how that resonates with the lyrics from Man Overboard. If you're new to my channel and you like rock and roll, by the way, make sure to subscribe for more. Everything I do here is 100% DIY, and your subscription does go a long way to help this channel grow. Dude Ranch was released on June 17, 97. Starting in the summer of 97, Blink began touring heavily. As a matter of fact, the band was on tour for about 9 months straight between parts of 97 and 98. The heavy touring schedule began taking its toll on the band, and tensions started to rise. Now, it's important to note that there were already some pre-existing differences between the members of the band, but the heavy touring schedule began to exacerbate things. For example, Scott Raynor, who was the youngest member of the band, had been expressing for years that he wanted to go to college at some point, and as a matter of fact, he'd sometimes bring homework with him on tour in order to try to complete his high school diploma. You wouldn't think that the drummer from Blink-182 would be doing homework on tour, but it happened. However, if you consider how young Scott was at the time, it does make a bit more sense. Scott Raynor was only 16 years old when Cheshire Cat was released and 19 when Dude Ranch came out, whereas Tom was 21 and Mark Hoppus was 25. In February of 98, the bandmates actually got into a physical fight. This happened in Nebraska at the end of the Snowcore 98 tour, Snowcore having been a touring festival sort of like Warped Tour was. After the Snowcore tour, the band had a brief US West Coast tour, and it was during this US West Coast tour that Scott Raynor suffered a, quote, tragic loss in his family. He subsequently left the tour temporarily to go visit his family back home. As such, Blink needed a drummer to fill in for Scott. As mentioned, 1997 was the year Blink released Dude Ranch, and it was also in 97 that the band Aquabats released their record, The Fury of the Aquabats. At the time, Aquabats' drummer was Travis Barker. And as a matter of fact, Aquabats and Blink-182 toured together while Travis was still in Aquabats. When Scott Raynor stepped away from the band to deal with whatever was happening in his family, Tom and Mark brought in Travis as his temporary replacement. Travis learned Blink's entire set in just 45 minutes before his first show with the band. Travis, Mark, and Tom clicked as a three-piece, but even so, this lineup was only temporary, as Scott Raynor was still the official drummer in the band. Scott's first show back with Blink was on May 1st, 1998, when the band played the Hollywood Palladium. Despite the time apart from each other, when Scott rejoined the band, things did not get better. As a matter of fact, the internal band struggles began to get worse. As a means of coping with all the tension, Scott was drinking heavily at the time. Following a short tour of New Zealand and Australia, which ended on May 25th, 98, Mark and Tom told Scott that he either had to quit drinking or go to rehab. To Scott's credit, he actually agreed to do both. Despite this, however, according to Scott Raynor, he was fired from the band anyways. Even so, Scott has said that he does not feel any ill will towards the band, and he even went as far as to say Tom and Mark were right to fire him. That takes a lot of strength of character to be able to say that, so I think Scott deserves credit for that. Now, as mentioned, the sessions for Enema of the State took place between January to March of 1999. This is less than a year after Scott was let go from the band. When you keep that in mind and you look at the lyrics for Man Overboard, it does seem like the song is about Scott Raynor. Some of the lyrics from the song include, "So sorry it's over, now you're a stranger, can't say I miss him around, loss of a good friend, left you in the bar to try and save face." Again, it should be noted that Scott Raynor was a teenager when he was in Blink, and because he's kept a low profile since his time with the band ended over 2 decades ago, there's really not much information about him out there. So, for all we know, he could have been sober ever since his time with Blink ended. Furthermore, to the best of my knowledge, Scott has never addressed publicly whether he thinks this song is about him or not, or what he thinks about the song in general. It'd be cool one day to hear from him what he thinks about this track, and in general to hear his side of the story on things because, again, there's not much info out there about Scott post-Blink. It's been over 2 decades since Scott's time with the band ended, so I would hope that things between Scott and the guys are good at this point. Because Scott is on the first 2 records, and there are, of course, ongoing royalties, etc. from those albums, I would think that Scott has in one way or another had some kind of contact with Mark and Tom over the years, but who knows. In any case, despite Man Overboard being written during the Enema sessions, the song was not recorded for that record. The song was officially released on September 2nd, 2000 as the lead single from Blink's live album, The Mark, Tom, and Travis Show. It was produced by Jerry Finn and recorded in July of 2000.
I want to show you one more clip now from my interview with Cheshire Cat's co-producer, Steve Kravac, where he talks about the differences between Tom DeLonge and Mark Hoppus in the studio at the time. If you want to see the full interview with Steve Kravac about Cheshire Cat, the link is available in the description box below. Again, all the interviews on my channel are original. If you want to support, the best way is to subscribe, like, and share. Tom and Mark, what was their relationship like in the studio? How are they together?
If I think back, I feel like Mark was completely ready at that point, even though he was 17, 18. Like, I felt like when he was in front of the mic, he had the composure he needed. I felt like Tom was maybe just a little bit more of the understudy at that point, but I don't mean that in a negative way, right? Like, Tom's songs are good. One of the things that I'm like most amazed with Tom about and very proud of what he's done is the Angels and Airwaves material. I love those records. I think they're fantastic, and I think they have tons of imagination. To know that he's made those records after meeting him as a kid and making that punk rock record together, that's a pretty huge deal, man. And I think it shows how much scope Tom has here, you know? I think he's a very gifted man. I think Mark is very gifted as well. I think at that point, Mark was maybe just a little bit more comfortable on his instrument. Tom was maybe a little less proficient with his instrument. And he, behind the microphone, maybe didn't have all of the composure that Mark had at the time. But you had to give the guy an A for effort. Like, he wanted to make a record. You know? And I think that he realized that, like they always say, when you join a band with other guys who are just a little bit better than you. And I felt like maybe Tom was in that spot where maybe mentor's a strong word. Maybe they're just like school chums, you know?
Yeah.
But I think maybe he felt like he had an anchor there with Mark. And I think that clearly, as they developed as songwriters and producers in their own right, that there was a network of support there between the two of them, you know? And that was probably pretty helpful. And I think there was also competition there as far as writing goes. And I think if you look at like a band like Husker Du, where Bob Mould and Grant Hart were co-writers, and you'd pretty much have equal amounts of each writer's songs on a record. I'm sure that there was, I can't speak to that, but I'm sure, knowing as an artist myself, I'm sure that there was a little bit of that competition there too, which probably was a good thing in pushing their writing and growing their sound, you know?
Yeah.
But also, like, it can't be overlooked that, like, that sophomoric, you know, humor and that attitude that they probably took with them out of high school, right? That they never really lost that, and they kept part of that. They realized that that was super, super important. It was almost more important than just what the band sounds like. It's like, maybe they only have one joke, but it's a good joke.
Yeah, well, Blink is definitely, you know, known for their antics as much as it is with, you know, the music.
Absolutely, right? And that's a big part of why kids love that band. Because they were entertaining. Because it's a party and you're all invited. You know, we're not here to tell you something. And that is part of the secret of that kind of success, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but I read a funny quote from Tom a little while back, and he essentially said, yeah, we started a revolution. It was a pretty stupid revolution, but it was a revolution nonetheless.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's a spot-on comment.
Tom typically sings in a higher register than Mark. So when you were recording the band, did you have to set up the mics in a different fashion or anything different?
Yeah, I probably actually set up one for each of them. I probably put whatever sounded good in front of Tom, and I probably put whatever sounded good in front of Mark. And I think if I recall, I might have used a U67 for Mark, and I might have used a C12A for Tom.
I guess this is just more of a subjective question for you personally. Did you prefer, the songs that Tom was vocalist on or that Mark was the vocalist on?
Probably Mark, just because he's got a little bit more tone. I mean, they both melodically kind of sing the same way, Those songs, the melodies only really ever have 3 or 4 notes. And you're just kind of bouncing around between those. I think with Tom, he's like, if you just look at his physical makeup, right, he's a little thinner, he's a little slimmer, he's a little slighter. And so it's kind of hard to get that kind of tone out of your body. Mark is sort of a bigger guy with sort of more of a chest to him. So he's going to sound a little broader. But what I would remark about that is just touching on that Angels and Airwaves thing again. Like, if I listen to those Angel and Airwaves records, like, I think his voice is perfectly suited to those songs. Like, every single one. Like, it never sounds too edgy. And sometimes he is kind of belty. But, man, it sits really, really good. So I think they're both terrific singers in their own right. I don't think that's something that they were born naturally with. I think it's something they both had to work at to get to.
So when you were in studio with Mark and with Tom, did you ever get that vibe that there was kind of a friendly rivalry between the two guys?
I don't know that there was enough time for me to discern that. Like, when I was speaking of what that maybe what helped that relationship, I was kind of speaking more from my personal experience than trying to extrapolate from their interactions. I kind of just seem to recall it also just kind of being like sort of back and forth. Okay, I'll sing a couple songs now. Okay, you got yours. I'll do a couple now, kind of thing. Like, it was just very back and forth. It was very workmanship, because of the allotted time. And so maybe there wasn't that much time to explore those nuances, right? But you're also striking when the iron's hot, and you're kind of bottling lightning when you're doing that. And that's where some of that energy came from, and keeping it moving along. So there isn't too much time to think about it.
When Tom left the band, was that surprising at all to you?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I think that what they had done was kind of worked out a formula that worked really well for them. So kind of to abandon that, to me, seemed like rash. Like, maybe you could take a break and come back to it or something. But again, like, I don't know the background there. So I can't speak to what anybody's, motivations, what might have been. I was actually more surprised that they got somebody else in to play in the band. Like, to get Skiba in to play in the band, that actually surprised me more. I thought the thing to do was, okay, well, you just play Mark songs